Thank you all for coming. How many people here have read this book so far? Good, that's better that way. Good. You're going to after tonight. I was very excited to be asked to quiz you about your life as much as about this book, which I really enjoyed, and I think everyone here will too. I've been a fan for a long time.
Thank you.
But I wanted to start by asking about your childhood, I think, when in Port Huron, Michigan, when you first discovered books, working in a library, which has always been my dream to do. Tell us about what that was like and how that changed you and influenced you.
Well, I was 14, and we were financially strapped. So I got a job. I was 14, and it was working at the library, making $1.25 an hour. And I was a page, which means I shelved books. And that's how I sort of discovered books and the Dewey Decimal System. And I used to hide in the dumbwaiter, because I was not very big. And I would sneak in there and sit in the stalls in the ladies' room and put my legs up so they would never know where I was. And I'd be in there reading. And that's sort of how I fell in love with books, sort of. But we lived in a house that was in Michigan, right? That was raggedy. And there was no such thing as air conditioning. And heat was also a problem. But my sister and I slept in the attic. And I'm the oldest of 5. And they got on my nerves. And so I was upstairs in the attic, and I had the fan on. And we had like these wooden planks on the floor. And I don't know, I leaned on one and it popped up. And then I looked down inside for some reason, and I saw these little gold pellets, and I thought I'd struck gold. And so I told my mother, we're rich, we can get out of this dump, okay? And it turned out it was insulation. So, but inside, and I'd start digging it out, and she said, put it back. And I ended up finding this little tiny book, and it was called Bartlett's Familiar Quotations. And I had never heard of it. And that's how I started realizing that people felt all kinds of things. I could just look up a word. And I was really blown away that someone had documented how other people felt about everything from peace and joy and you name it. And I still have the book. And that was like 1960 something.
Wow.
But, and I bought other editions, but that one really changed me because I had never read anything like it. And I didn't know that people actually documented what they felt and thought. So it liberated me. I didn't feel as lonely as I was, apparently.
Was it expected? Was your mother surprised when you said you wanted to come to Los Angeles to go to school? Because I grew up in a family where education wasn't the priority or possibility, so it must have been a big shock for her.
No, it was a priority. My mother had 5 kids by the time she was in 11th grade. I mean, by the time she was 23.
Wow. Close.
She had me when she was in the 11th grade, but no. And one of the things that she said was that everybody in this house is going to college. And we did.
Wow.
2 didn't graduate, but they stepped foot in there and they hung out for a while. But, and there were certain things there are certain kinds of language we could not use. We had to be able to enunciate properly. She knew what it was, the difference. And we couldn't say ain't and can't and all that didn't work in our house. And I ended up in college.
But was it shocking for her that you went to college so far away? Because that's,
Oh
especially
yeah,
as the eldest.
my mother got a little. She wasn't speaking to me when I left because I wanted to get out of Michigan, and I used to watch 77 Sunset Strip and Adventures in Paradise, and I said, "There's a world out there, and I'm going to see it." So I got a scholarship to a junior college in my hometown, and I turned it down, which really just pissed her off. And when I went to leave, I moved to Los Angeles to stay with a cousin, which was a big mistake. But she was a spinster at 30. She was not nice. But my mother didn't speak to me. Not the first year, until I started sending envelopes home with $20 bills in them. And then everybody wanted to come visit. So, But no, she ended up being proud. Then I went to LACC. Then I ended up going to Berkeley.
And what was that like to leave? I mean, just leaving Michigan for California is jarring enough, but then to be thrust into this world must have been.
No, I told you I watched TV. I was prepared for it.
So it all looked like.
I'm not trying to be funny. I'm serious. I wanted to get the hell out of Michigan. I mean, I didn't like where I grew up. It was depressing. And back then, by the time I graduated, so many of my friends were ODing. Heroin was really big then, and people were dying, and young people, and there was a lot of domestic violence back in those days. And I just knew that this is not the way to live. And my mother knew that this was not the way she wanted us to live. So, and I mean, I wasn't gone long. And I looked up and, she said, "We're coming out there to visit." Well, it was like the Beverly Hillbillies. She rented a U-Haul and she forgot to pay for it. And they all showed up at my one. I had a roommate in a 2-bedroom apartment, and
Here in LA or up in Berkeley?
in Los Angeles. And I said, "Well, how long are you guys staying?" And they said, "We think we want to live here too." And I was like, "Oh." And I got them an apartment because I had like a job, and I helped them get an apartment. Once I got the truck, which they confiscated and paid for that with all their personal belongings on it. But that was my mama.
She done good.
Yeah.
So what was your job while you were going to school here?
I worked as I worked as a secretary. 5757 Wilshire Boulevard. Now I think SAG is there.
So you're going to school?
I worked for Prudential Insurance Company while I was at LACC. And I learned in high school how to type really fast and take dictation. Those days are long gone.
Word processing, right? That job.
No, but I typed. I typed like 120 words a minute. And I got a job working for insurance. But let me tell you what I didn't know then. I worked in the real estate investment service division. How I remember that, I do not know. But, and I was going to LACC. And I remember I just read Gloria Steinem, Ms. Magazine. I started reading that. And I read where she said, something about women should be able to wear slack suits. And I said, yes, we should. And I used to take dictation, and I had this boss, his name was Mr. Huff, and he was old as dirt. And his hair was white and everything, so I came in my little Jonathan Logan. Anybody ever remember Jonathan Logan? Hey, let me tell you, my little beige and chocolate brown plaid, little bell bottoms, I was narrow, I didn't have any hips, and the little top, and I go in with my little steno pad, "Terry, could you come and take dictation?" I said, yes. So I go in, and he took his little glasses, and he said, "What's that you're wearing?" I said, "It looks like a pantsuit." And he said, yeah. He said, when did you guys start wearing those? And I said, today. And the next day, all the women came in there had on slacks. I mean, it was a good job. Yeah, I was like, today. But I learned how to, I was a key punch operator in high school for the company I cannot stand now, who has my cell phone called AT&T. But,
Hope you got some stock back then. No.
but they used to foreclose on people's houses. And, you know, I said, you guys are writing the wrong kind of letters, first of all. Do you think people really want to not pay their mortgage? Why don't you give them options? And so they said, well, Terry, write the letters. And so I came up with 3 different letters where they could make, instead of, if you can't pay 1 payment, how are you gonna make 3? Okay, and so I developed these letters and put the little envelopes in, and I said, you know, just pay 1/3 of it or whatever, and we amortize it over a period of time. And let me tell you, I got a raise because those checks started coming in, and that's when I realized I think I had a few writing skills. But they were being mean. I just said, you know, you can't like make people give you money if they don't have it. And what is the point of taking their home? Help them out, you know, and it worked.
But so it didn't occur to you that you could go the finance track as opposed to the writing track, where obviously the writing track was more alluring, but the banking or business, you know, being a businesswoman was a more,
I
not
wasn't
a
a
sure bet.
businesswoman. Are you kidding me?
It would
No,
it never
I had
occurred
a job.
to you. So it never occurred to you to stay corporate or no?
That was boring. No, I wanted to. I ended up getting accepted to Berkeley, and I got out of LA and moved up north, where I, you know,
You studied journalism there.
yes, but no, I don't like sitting. The desk I like sitting behind is mine.
It's worked out for you.
But back then I didn't know. But no, insurance was boring.
But how did you, it is a scary thing to come from a working class family, I know, and take a path that's not certain. A job is a little bit more certain. Obviously, we know today it's not. So how did you know that you needed to be a writer? Because that's what happens, right? You feel like you can't not write.
Well, no, it took a while to get there. It was basically by accident. I started out, I wrote a poem, and somebody discovered it sitting at my kitchen table, and they published it. It's a long story, but, and then I'll put it this way. When I ended up at Berkeley, I had until my junior year to declare, and so I saw my advisor, and I started writing these scathing editorials for like our campus newspaper. And then we had one, black students had developed our own newspaper called Black Thoughts. So I wrote for both of them. And apparently my advisor shocked me when he told me he had been reading my articles, and I was like embarrassed. But I had a vocabulary at the time. And I used to take a lot of philosophy classes, and I was smart back then. But anyway, so I ended up majoring. Long and short of it is I didn't want to major in journalism and all that. I mean, in English. So I ended up majoring in journalism. And I didn't like answering the who, what, when, where, and why in that lead paragraph. And not only that, but I found out that, you know, we used to have to review films and go to the theater and all, you know, and it was boring. And so I just lied, and I made up reviews. I found out that you can lie and people believe it. I'm serious. That's how I started writing fiction. That's sort of how I started. But and I got an A in that class. I was like, what idiots.
So But you still detoured to film school first, right? Which is an interesting
Yeah.
detour. You were going to lie in the movies instead.
No, I was told that, I'd never be able to make it as a writer. That nobody would. And so I said, you know what? I always loved film. And so I ended up applying to the MFA program at Columbia, and I got in, and I was in a screenwriting track. But the head of the head of the screenwriting track, he was a racist. And he told me and this one African guy, he pulled us aside and said, I would read scenes and people in the class would be crying and all this, And he was good too. And so the professor pulled us aside and said, do you know how hard it is to make your living as a screenwriter? And I said, no. And he said, well, it's really difficult. He said, I want you to take this book and read it and then tell me if you think you're really interested. And it was Jack London's Sailor on Horseback. And I read it, and then it turns out he had only given it to me and this guy. And I went in there, I called him out on it, and I said, hey, I don't know who you think you're dealing with here. As a young person, I said this, but this is racist. Why'd you choose us? Mm-hmm. And he said, well, because you are black, and it's even harder if you're black. And I said, okay. And let me tell you something. My first book, I mailed him a copy. Second book, I didn't know where he was. And the third book became a movie.
Yes, right, that
and
you wrote.
I said, I'm sure if he was still alive, he probably knew it. And probably took credit for something,
But so, you got out of that world, you went to a law firm, you applied your typing skills, and in the off hours you were going to the Harlem Writers Workshop, right? Mm-hmm. Is that where you were writing Mama, the first draft of Mama?
Yes.
And that's where it drops out for so many of us in this room. It never goes any further than that, but obviously that's what happened for you. Can you talk about how you finished it and how it got out into the world and set you on the path you're on now?
Well, I'll put it this way. I never knew nor even thought that one day I would be able to make my living as a writer. I mean, come on. No, we're talking the 80s.
Yeah, it was a bad time.
No, and I knew Toni Morrison, Alice Walker, Zora Neale Hurston had already passed. And that was pretty much it back then. But as it turned out, it was something that I started writing short stories, and I loved short stories to this day. That's my favorite genre. Mm-hmm. But
so you were writing this, you were practicing that craft.
I'll put it this way. I'm trying to figure out how to say this succinctly.
It's all right, we've got time.
No, we don't. Forensic Files will be on at 9:39.
Glad you got your
I'll put it this way. It turned out that fiction was what I found. I got a lot of comfort from writing about people that were going through things that I didn't quite understand. And I was always nosy as a young person, and I didn't understand, like what I said earlier about the way that we grew up. I saw a lot of violence, and I just did not understand it. It just did not make sense to me that this is how people behaved and how we treat each other. And so it always, and then in my little Bartlett's quotations, I could read about this stuff, and a lot of things still just didn't make sense about our behavior. And so I would write, and I learned a lot about characterization and all that. And that's really all I really wanted to be able to do, was to understand more. I didn't set out to write novels so that one day I could grow up and become famous. Mm-hmm. That was not it at all. And plus, I didn't know that that was even possible. And I wrote stories, and because I really was just interested in understanding why we do what we do, and myself included. And so that's when I really realized how easy it was to make up things so that you can tell a lot of truths. And that's all I did. And then Houghton Mifflin had a scholarship, a fellowship program where they would publish your novel for $7,500, and they would publish it and all that. And at the time, I had written, I'd been writing stories, and I think I got a couple of stories published in literary quarterlies. And then, so I submitted I got my novel, which Mama I finished it, a very rough draft. Very, very rough. Because the way I write, and I often tell my students, don't go back to edit before you finish it, because you'll never finish it. I call it literary masturbation. You just keep doing it over and over and over and over. You need to, you write a draft and you finish it, and then because you can always go back and edit, but you get the guts and all of that out if you just write it. And so I had gotten, Columbia University also had this graduate workshop where you submitted a novel that hadn't been published, and you got this master fiction class. Well, I had never really had a fiction class, and so I submitted it, and I got this master's, and this guy was wonderful. So then I applied for the Houghton Mifflin thing, and I sent my stories, and I told them, I won this award, this little fellowship at Columbia, thinking, that might help. And then they ended up calling me, and they said, look, we like these stories, but we want to know what happened, where's that novel? And I said, I can't send that. It's not ready to be read. And they said, let us decide that. We like your voice. And so they said, could you Federal Express it to us? I said, I don't have no Federal Express money. Federal Express it. And I said, I can't afford to Federal Express anything. And so they paid for it, and I apologized, and long and short of it is they published it. That's how it happened. But I'll put it this way. I've taught at University of Wyoming, University of Arizona for 3 years. Believe it or not, I'm a tenured professor.
Yeah.
I taught at Stanford 1 quarter, where my son graduated from, but he had nothing to do with it. But one of the things that a lot of young writers and older writers who are just starting out don't understand is that you can't think about, you don't look at the big picture when you're writing. It's what's on the page that's more important, not the results. Mm-hmm. Because it's like, I don't know, it's like cheating. And you don't have to write. And so if you're going to do it, you put your heart into it. And you take the people that are on that page very, very seriously. Even though in my work there's a lot of humor, but it's like, I call it tragic humor. But I want to be a different or better person after having gone through what I put these characters through, so that I develop what I would like to think of as to be more empathetic. Mm-hmm. Because otherwise, why bother? I'm not trying to write to impress you. I'm not trying to write to tell you what I think I already know. That is literary masturbation. And I'm not interested. I want to grow as a result of taking the time, the year or two, whatever it takes to write this story. And it takes a certain amount of poise and patience. And a lot of us don't give ourselves permission to feel that. And that's the only way you'll write, honestly.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Big difference, right.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about that, but first I have to ask you, when Mama came out, what was your family's reaction? I mean, there's nothing more thrilling than writing a book and actually it's published, it's out there. What did they, were they thrilled? Were you thrilled? Or was it just
Well,
fraught?
my mama was thrilled.
Yeah, I can't imagine she wasn't.
Because she sat, I had this baby, and she came to help me out and everything, and so she was reading the book. And she said, she would just sit there and laugh. And she said, how you know all this stuff? And I said, what stuff? And she said, you didn't make this shit up. That's just how she said it. And I said, yeah, I did. She said, I know this got to be Sybil because she got some dumb-ass kids. And I was like, Ma. And she would just sit there and laugh. But when the book actually came out, we go to Detroit, and I did have some relatives that stopped speaking to me because my mother told me, you're in this book. And it was kind of based on them. But other than that, I mean, it was my first book. They're almost always autobiographical. But my mother, when my sister had she had this really big house in Detroit. And so we had this book party, and it was like about, 75 people there. And so I was signing books. Well, guess who else was autographing them? Mama. She said, Terry, I need a pen. And so I signed them, and she was like, love Madeline. And I'm so glad she was able to do that.
Oh, that's so great. You could almost stop right there, right? You made her so happy.
I don't even know if she ever even read the whole book, to be honest with you.
I'll skip ahead now to Waiting to Exhale and how I was sitting on my living room floor in New York as however old I was. It was a couple years after it came out, so I was in my early 30s. And I first of all, I picked it up, probably a lot of people had this experience, and read it cover to cover, sitting on the floor, crying and laughing. And I just felt like I related to every single woman in the book. I'm sure you've heard the story 5 million times from 5 million people. But what I wanted to ask you is, were you crying and laughing as you were writing this book? Because obviously it didn't come out the way I read it. So what was that experience like? And did you know that this was going to be a runaway blockbuster, change your life forever?
Are you kidding me?
No.
No. You don't know. I mean, it's sort of like having a baby. All you hope is that it has 10 fingers and 10 toes and it's healthy. And that somebody thinks it's cute. Really, that's pretty much it. But, I mean, I took a writing workshop at Berkeley with Ishmael Reed. Anybody know who he is?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, he's a really brilliant poet and essayist and satirist and novelist and short story writer. And playwright. Ishmael can do pretty much everything. Mm-hmm. But that was a one fiction writing class that I took at Berkeley. I forgot to mention that. But he was the one who told me that I had a voice. And he said, don't lose it. And he said, if you go to an MFA program, they will distill it. And he didn't know by that time I'd already applied. And I got accepted to Brown, 3 of them, to MFA programs, and then I didn't go. And I'm glad that I didn't go. But I wrote the kind of story about these women that I wanted to read. I wanted to understand why it was that most of my friends and I, who were like in our early 30s, had done it all right. We went to school, college, blah, blah, blah. And we were not getting any dates. And I was like, what's wrong with this picture? And back then, this is like the late 80s, it was a whole different situation.
Yeah.
Then. And, now I kind of wish maybe I had been a lesbian, may have been easier. Shit. I'm just talking. But the thing is that we all, you call each other up and say, "What you doing, girl? Nothing. What you doing this week? Nothing." And I was like, and then every woman's magazine, all it was is where to meet men, church, libraries, and I was thinking, so it wasn't just black women. And I said, this is what's going on here? And so it was an inquiry. That's what Waiting to Exhale was initially. And then I ended up getting lost in the characters and just had a really good time. But I don't remember crying. I remember being mad. I might have cried. I don't know.
Was it fun though? Was it a fun
process?
I
have cathartic? A good. Every book that I write, even this one. I mean, excuse me. I get lost. I mean, when I'm writing a book, Terry McMillan doesn't even exist when I sit down at that computer. I am like, I'm not there. What comes out of my fingertips, I'm like the conduit. It's like, there are things that I do to prepare so I get to know who these people are. And I always start with a situation. And whatever it is that's bothering me, that's the story that I know I'm going to tell. And so I have to people it, the story. And I've never really used people as a verb. I liked it. Did you like that?
It's good.
I peopled it. Doesn't make much sense. Anyway.
No, it worked. I think everybody understood.
But you have to be willing. And that's how I do all of these, how I've written you have to get lost. Too many young people think they're important. What they feel is more important than anything. And so, and especially if they're smart, they want to make sure that everybody knows it. Nobody really cares. And I'm more interested in how people feel. And on some levels, what you think. Everybody is not going to agree with the way that I think or the way that I feel. And sometimes you don't even know it until you write it down. Because a lot of times you don't articulate it. A lot of people talk to each other, but a lot of people aren't honest about what they feel. And you get a chance to do that on the paper, on the page. And so sometimes, I give characters what I would like to think of, what I know are sometimes my weaknesses, my flaws, and I have enough to last for a whole bunch of books. And, I want all of us to be happy, okay? And so I write about characters who are going through something and they're not happy. And so I write stories so that whatever it is that they have to go through, there is no panacea. It's not going to be a fairy tale, but they're going to be further along. They're going to discover something about themselves that will give them some strength. And instead of going from A to Z, they might get to D, but it's further than they were. And that, to me, is what life is about. So that you learn from, and a lot of us don't learn from our experiences. In a book, you can have it happen, but without preaching, I'm not looking down on my characters, not even close. I'm trying to understand why sometimes we do ourselves more harm than anybody. And it's not hard to do, but it's not as hard to work for yourself instead of against yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's where getting older is good too, right? When you get older, it's a little easier to work for yourself, right?
Well, it depends on if you learn from your past.
If you're paying attention, right?
Yeah, it really depends. Nobody's perfect, but that's this book here. I was interested in, I'm 64. My mother passed away when she was 59. And, my son is 32. I'm like, okay, I love what I do for a living, but I know a lot of people who don't. They went to law school, medical school, blah, 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 whatever. Women and men. And they reach this point in their lives, late 40s, 50s, 60s, and they realize that what they've been doing is not cutting it anymore. Mm-hmm. It's not as fulfilling, it's not as gratifying. And, you don't really need the big house with the grass you gotta cut, well, except in California. But you realize that there is such a thing as mortality, and that, you look on Twitter and Prince is dead, Michael Jackson is dead, and you think, shit, am I next? But more than anything, you realize that, I might have 20, 25 years left. How am I gonna spend it? Doing this? No. And so my attitude is, I don't want to walk around the bases. I want to slide into home. Okay?
And that's what happens here in this book with Georgia.
Well, I don't know.
Well,
I'm going to read a little something.
I think it's time for you to read this.
Well, I just read a little section. What?
They'll sit here all night, listen to the
What
whole
time
book.
is it?
What time does your show start?
What show?
You wanted to watch Forensic Files or something.
Be glad that the NBA finals are over. Because when I was in Kansas City, St. Louis, and I had like 400 people. And I was like, I hope you guys don't want your name in your book. And they said, what? And I said, the finals are on. And they were like, yes, they are, Ms. McMillan. I said, anybody want their name in? Give me a score. I said, I got to be out of here by 9 o'clock. Okay? And I was out of there by 9 o'clock. Because I was going crazy. But anyway.
Next time your book has to come out in the fall, so there's no chance.
No. And yay, Kevin Durant. I can't wait. As soon as I find out when they have the schedule.
You're up there.
Hey, I don't care how much the ticket costs. I do not care. I will crawl to the Bay Area to go to that game. And when my son was little, we lived in the Bay Area. We had season tickets to the Warriors games. You'd fall asleep. The game, they used to lose every game. The arena was empty, if only. Anyway, so I'll just read you a little bit of this real quick.
You're going to start at the start.
Huh?
Start at the start.
Okie dokie. There's no little kids in here, huh? Yeah. It's another exciting Friday night, and I'm curled up in bed alone, of course, propped up by a sea of pillows still in my lab coat, the sash so taut it's suffocating the purple silk dress beneath it, but I don't care. After a grueling day of back-to-back patients, I'm a few minutes away from being comatose, but I'm also hungry, which is why I'm channel surfing and waiting for my pizza to get here. I stop when I come to my favorite standby, Law & Order, Criminal Intent, even though I've seen almost all of them, including the reruns. These days, I usually just watch the first 5 or 10 minutes, long enough to see Detective Gorin stride onto the crime scene in his long trench coat, tilt his head to the side while he puts on those rubber gloves, rub the new growth on that beautiful square chin, and bend down to study the victim. It's at that moment, this moment, before he utters a word, when I usually pucker up, blow him a kiss, and then change the channel. I've lusted over Detective Gorin and yearned to be held against shoulders like his long before my second marriage bottomed out. Truth be told, over the years, I've fallen in love every Wednesday with Gary Jordan's lips as CSI Warwick Brown. And even though I was no Trekkie, Avery Brooks's deep baritone and sneaky smile made me say yes aloud to the TV. I also let myself be seduced for hours in dark theaters, hypnotized by Benicio del Toro's dreamy eyes, even though he was a criminal, by Denzel's swagger when he was a slick gangster, Brad Pitt as a sexy young thief, Ken Watanabe as the most sensual samurai I wanted to ride on a horse with, and I wanted to be a black geisha and torture him until I finally let him have all of me. I hate to admit it, but if I had the energy, I'll only read this section, okay? But if I had the energy, I'd kill to have sex with the first one who walked into my bedroom tonight. I'd let him do anything he wanted to do to me. It's been centuries since I've had sex with a real man, and I'm not even sure I'd remember what to do should I ever be so lucky again. This is not autobiographical. In fact, I think I'd be too uncomfortable, not to mention scared of getting all touchy-feely, and don't even get me started on him seeing me naked. Hell, this is why I sleep with a remote. When I hear the doorbell, I glance over at the broken blue clouds inside the clock on the night table. I've been waiting 40 minutes for this pizza, which means they're gonna owe me a free one. I roll off the bed on my side, even though the other side has been empty for years. I walk over to the door and yell, "Be right there." Then I grab my wallet out of my purse and beeline it to the front door because I'm starving. That is so not true. I'm just a little hungry, and I'm trying to stop lying to myself about little things, and I'm still working on the big ones. I open the door and standing there sweating is a young black kid who can't be more than 18. His head looks like a small globe of shiny black twists that I know are baby dreadlocks. His cheeks are full of brand new zits. His name tag says free. I'm so sorry for the delay, man. There was an accident at the bottom of the hill, and I couldn't get up here, so this one's on the house. He looks so sad, and I'm wondering if the price of this pizza is going to be deducted from his little paycheck, but I dare not ask. I don't mind paying for it, I say. It wasn't your fault there was an accident. I take the pizza from him and set it on the metal stairwell. That's real thoughtful of you. But I'm just glad this is my last delivery for the night, he says, leaning to one side as if he's pretending not to look behind me, but of course he is. This is a real nice crib you got here. I ain't never seen no yellow floors before. It's downright wicked. Thanks, I say, and hand him a 20. He looks as if he's in shock. Like I said, man, this pizza's on the house, and I got some drink coupons you can have too, he says, pulling them out of his pocket of his red shirt. It's a tip. Is your real name Free? Yes, ma'am. How do you feel about it? I dig it. I get asked all the time about it. So how old are you, Free? 18. He's still staring at that 20, but then quickly shoves it inside the back pocket of his jeans in case I come to my senses and change my mind. Are you in college? I'm hoping he says yes and that he's taking English, so one day he'll soon stop saying ain't. Almost, that's why I'm working. You really giving me this whole 20? I nod. Do you know what you want to major in? Mechanical engineering, he says with certainty. That's great. Your husband rich. What makes you think I'd have to have a husband to be rich? Everybody that live up in these hills is, even them two dykes that live next door, and they married. Those dykes aren't just my neighbors, they're my friends, and they're also lesbians. All right, my bad, he says, flinging his arms up like don't shoot. Today's not a good day to say that, though. I didn't mean no harm. I know, anyway, I'm divorced, and I'm not rich, but I also don't struggle. You cleaned him out then, huh? No. Then he gives me the once-over. You some kind of doctor? I look down at my lab coat. Yes, I'm an optometrist. Which one is that? I help people see clearly. I say so as not to complicate it. Well, who helps you, he asks, with a smile which throws me off completely. What a loaded question to ask a woman old enough to be his grandmother. Just fooling with you, Dr. Young. No disrespect intended. None taken, Free. Who helps me see what, I'm thinking. Cool, well look, I gotta dash and get this car back to my cousin, but major thanks for the mega tip, and I have to say it's nice somebody black gave it to me, because most of the white folks up here ain't big on tipping except for them lesbians. What he just said was a little on the racist and sexist side, but I know he meant well. He runs down the sidewalk and jumps into that raggedy car of his, removes the pizza sign displayed on top, and disappears down the hill. I lean against the door frame, watching him go. I really should have praised him for working to pay for college, and if he hadn't been in such a hurry, I would have loved to have told him that he might find his calling in college, and he might not. But I'd also tell him to search until he did. Otherwise, he could end up doing something he just happened to be good at, something respectable that might guarantee him a nice income. But one day when he's older, like say 53, soon to be 54, when his kids have grown up and he's twice divorced and bored with his profession and his life, and the thought of trying to change it all or even where he lives scares the hell out of him because it feels like it's too late, I'd tell him to please figure out a way to do it anyway, since I'm an excellent example of what can happen when you don't. I turn off the porch light, close the door, and I can't believe all of this is flooding in. I walk across these cool yellow concrete floors and sit on these cool metal stairs and look out at the light jutting up through those soft navy blue waves in that cool black bottom pool. And I look up a flight where both of my daughters used to sleep, and I look down to where the library and guest room are, and I sit here and eat this entire cheese and tomato pizza. I am full of regret. Thank you. That's enough. Thank you. God, I wish I had a pizza.
Maybe somebody will get us one. Ted's gonna, you have some questions already? I can't see.
Yeah, if anyone has questions, please raise your hand. I'm happy to bring the microphone to you.
While he's bringing the questions over to us, one last one from me. Friendships, obviously rich, textured, wonderful friendships, you must have many. I've always wondered when I've read your books, are these people, are you drawing from people you, tell me about your girlfriends.
I have girlfriends. I have friends I've had 40, 45 years.
So you do have
Yes.
old dear friends, yeah.
Yes. And I was just reviewed finally in the New York Times, which was a miracle.
Never happened before, this is the
Yeah,
first
it's
time.
happened, but it's been a couple years, couple books. And the reviewer starts out by saying, you know, the thing about McMillan, Terry McMillan's books, you know, she always has these girlfriends, women always have friends, and, you know, they're willing to drop everything, you know, to help each other out.
Like
I'm
this.
saying to myself, is that a fucking character? Is that a character defect? I mean, really. I mean, and I'm saying to myself, and then she said, and not only that, but her protagonist doesn't have any financial problems. And I was like, what a racist bitch. Because I'm thinking, I mean, I have to say it like that, because I'm saying to myself, how many books by white women writers with white protagonists do you start out reviewing them, talking about, like it's a surprise that she can pay her bills? I just really resented it. You know?
No one
she doesn't have any financial problems. And so, and the bottom line is that she said, when she talks about the friendships, and I ended up telling my age, and I said, you know what? And they were like, Tear, but it's such a nice review and all this. And I'm like, you know what? I don't care if I get reviewed in the Times. I don't care. But the bottom line is this. She reviewed me from her position, not what was in the book. Okay? And I said, she doesn't know anything. And almost all of my books have friendships between women. And in this case, some of them, and my friends have, my characters also have white friends. They're not always black. But there's something about friendship that is valuable. And I have girlfriends, and most of the women that I know, it's like, they're like sisters. You know, you share everything. You tell your girlfriend stuff you wouldn't tell your mama. You wouldn't tell anybody else. You wouldn't tell your sister. And, you know, I've lent money, borrowed money. We do everything for each other. Mm-hmm. And it's partially because we don't want anything really from each other, but friendship, and we trust each other, and we know we have each other's back, and that's a good thing to have in your life.
It always made me frustrated because you wrote Sex and the City before there was Sex and the City. And yeah.
You know, a lot of people said that.
Oh, I'm not the first, but no.
And I
it's
met
true.
her that,
Candace.
yeah. I slapped her. No. No, but it's kind of true. But it's okay. I did all right.
Yeah, you've done good.
Questions?
Where'd he go? Oh, sorry.
I have a question. I have a 13-year-old daughter who just finished.
I can't really hear you, hon.
I have a 13-year-old daughter who just finished her first book. It's a mystery that she made up a city in World War II. And I want to know, do you have any advice for like young writers on like how to go about finish writing, what kind of advice they can take, who they can like, who you would have look at their stuff, just some words of encouragement for her because she couldn't come today and I wanted to find out if I could videotape your answer to show her.
What did she just say?
She's her 13-year-old daughter has written a book based on a fictitious World War II city that she created, and she wants to know where to go with it. 13, that's pretty remarkable. Wow. What do you do when you have a book?
Well, at 13, well, she should probably try to get an agent. I mean, I don't know how important it is, but sometimes, I mean, you have kids that people can be prodigies. Kids go to a bookstore and look up literary agents and look up children's books. But if she wrote it as if she was an adult,
Wow.
or from a children's
Probably
point.
teen. It's a little older than children's teen book, probably.
Then look up, I'll put it this way. If there are certain books that she admires and or you admire that are written for young people, a lot of times writers will thank their agents. And also there are books that you can read about the craft of writing, and they're books on literary agents, and you can go in and look, and you can buy them or just go to the bookstore and read them and see which agents represent writers who write for young adults or children or teenagers or whatever. I don't know about agents that represent children, but the bottom line is that if what she has, even if it's just a sample chapter or chapters or 40, 50 pages, inquire. And some of these books will tell you exactly how to do that. I mean, she's a kid, and I don't know if it's too soon to do that. I would think so, but not necessarily. But I would start there. But just encourage her to keep writing.
Wow.
I don't know how important it is for her to try to get published at 13. But I'm not the one to answer that. That's pretty cool, though.
That's really cool, yeah.
Hi, Terry. I bring greetings to you from my book club, Sisters in Touch with Books. And I just wanted to tell you that I really enjoyed the read. One thing.
I'm having problems with that microphone. It's
hard
not
to-
as clear as this one.
Okay, I was just saying, hi, Terry. I bring greetings to you from Sisters in Touch with Books, which is my book club. And I wanted to let you know that I enjoyed the read. 2 questions for you. I felt like the characters I identified with were enablers at some point. And I thought, wow, is that a lesson for me?
You don't like the characters in what?
They were enablers, meaning that, for instance, Violet said, I'm going to sell, my houseboat so that I can get a home to bring my daughter in with the baby. It's like,
Yeah.
whoa. And then, you have George's daughters, she's coming back. Oh, okay, stay in the guest house, bring your man with you. I mean, I just thought that it was kind of somewhat of an enabling, the characters were enablers, and I don't want to be that, but it's a good lesson for me. So I totally identify with that, and I just wanted to ask you if you felt that the characters had that kind of spirit, but a lesson for your readers.
I don't see them as enablers. Do you have kids?
Yes.
You never went out of your way for them?
Yeah, but to a certain extent, like when they're
And your friends? If my friend's house was in foreclosure and she needed some money, she could borrow it.
right.
I don't see that as enabling. Okay, regardless of how she got there. If it happened more than once, that's a different story. But I'm not going to let my friend, I'm not going to try to teach her a lesson and call her an enabler because she can't pay her mortgage. And kids grow up. They make mistakes. They do things that are stupid. And especially when they're teenagers and they're in college, they are trying to get their footing. And, you know, if your daughter comes home and she's pregnant by somebody you don't like, what you going to do? You're going to try to help her figure out what she's going to do or help her. And, you know, most of us don't live by numbers, honey. And if that's the case, life would be pretty boring. And you have to understand, too, I'm writing about people that I would like to think of as real on the page and three-dimensional. I'm not trying to win a psychological award for having people be so perfect. That's just the opposite. You know, we all do these kinds of things. So even using the term enabler, I would never think of them that way, even though they may very well be, but I don't think so. Okay. Thank you. But if you don't like them, that's cool. Huh?
I see myself. I don't want to be an enabler, so I'm glad I learned a lesson.
But it's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm serious. And being able to do things for other people does not make you an enabler. It means you might be helpful or empathetic. Look at it that way.
Hi, Terry.
Hi.
I'm a huge fan of yours, and I loved Mama and Disappearing Acts. Those are my two favorites. I have a question for you. As a writer, I've had moments or phases where I've gone into writer's block. I'm wondering if you've had times when you were working on a project and you had a phase of writer's block where you just had to put it down and find your way back. Do you have any suggestions?
Everybody does.
Everybody does.
What do you write?
Writer's block, fiction.
Huh?
A fiction.
Are you writing a novel?
Writing a novel. Yes.
Have you written one before?
It's my first.
How many pages do you have?
About 350.
Yeah, that's almost a book. Have you been editing it?
I've had it professionally edited, and that sent me into a block in that it was overwhelming. So I had to put it down and say, whoa.
You're suffering from literary constipation. And that's a big mistake. Finish the book first. I mean, didn't I say that a little bit earlier? You know, too many people are trying to be perfect. You're looking over your own shoulder. You don't want to do that because you will stop and get blocked every time. You need to write as if nobody's ever going to read it. That's a good way to do it. And you will be able, I mean, the easiest, editing doesn't take, you need your heart to write a novel or write a good short story. This comes into play when you edit. You can tap this anytime. But when you're trying to get into your characters and find out who they are and what their motivations are, why they are doing this and that, you have to give your characters the freedom to live on the page. And a lot of times what stops you is because as a writer, you are invading their space and you are trying too hard to make this beautiful or make it sound it's going to be a good book and it's a story. When you're writing a novel or story, I'm serious. When I'm sitting at that computer, Terry McMillan does not exist. And that's how seriously I take my characters and their lives and what's happening on that page. And I see it, just like that little boy. I didn't know there was going to be a pizza kid in here on the second page or whatever. And I saw the kid. And I didn't know that she was going to have the reaction that she had with this kid, to this kid. And I was like really surprised. And I mean, the way that I wrote it, it stayed. But I kept going, all 695 pages of it. Okay? Then I go back. So just keep going and do not ever pay anybody professionally to edit your work, and especially before you finish it. You know? Don't do that.
You get into the zone and then you work for really early in the morning, right? And for 4 or 5 hours until, and then what
Not
do you,
5 hours, honey. No.
4, 3?
I go to boot camp 3 days a week.
After working, you work
I-
first thing in the morning and then go?
Yeah, I work at the crack of dawn because I want my characters and to get my best energy. Because by the time the phone rings, somebody wants something, you know, your accountant wants you to know whatever. Somebody's having a baby shower. You know, and it's like I don't want to jump out of. I don't want to leave. It's called, I'll put it this way. I think John Gardner used to call writing a continuous dream. And that's what writing is. It's a continuous dream. And as soon as you lift your finger off that page, you stop the dream. And I rarely read. I don't go back and read what I'm writing. I know it's tacky. I know it's raggedy. I know there are holes in it. I know there are things that don't make sense. I don't care. I don't really care right now because that's where editing comes in. But I want to get, I wrote How Stella Got Her Groove Back in 31 days, the draft. You can write a book fast if you stay out of it and you just let the characters tell the story. And all you do is listen to them, watch them, see what they see, feel what they feel. And you'd be surprised, and it is very liberating. Very, very liberating. You would be surprised. But sometimes we jump ahead of ourselves. We're too busy trying to figure out how we're going to get it published and all that. And take your characters and the story that you're telling very seriously. Take it real seriously, even if it's humor in it, because that's still serious. But do that first. And don't worry. Don't worry about how quickly and how soon you're going to get published. Your story and the people in it should be much more important. And when you do it right, somebody's going to pay attention to it.
Do you think writer's block is a myth?
Writer's block is not a myth. I think writer's block happens when you're afraid that what you're doing isn't good enough. And so rather than worry about it, you can't do anything. It's like you put the plug in the tub and nothing's gonna go down the drain. That's a bad analogy. But you're stuck. That's the point. And you're too busy trying to edit yourself. That's what stops people. Mm-hmm. And also, what really causes writer's block, because I've had it, when I start thinking, oh, Lord, my publisher, she's not going to like this. And then finally, I just say, really, and I write the story I stop myself. But you ever meditated? Anybody here ever meditated? Pray. I know you pray. Okay, same thing. If you can quiet your mind, that's what writing should be able to afford you the opportunity to do. You really jump out of your skin. And when you do that, you're not thinking a year from now when your book is on the shelf. You don't, I have 9 books now. I don't think like that. I don't think like that. I don't think, oh, gee, is this one going to be a bestseller? Who's going to star in the movie? No. Georgia Young is who I was concerned about, and her mama, and her kids, and her friends. And it's a world that you jump inside of, and you have to take it seriously. I mean, for real. And if not, that's what stops you. You know, when you're more, and the other thing is that sometimes people like to show off or show out. And if you don't think it's as pretty as you thought it was, you know, I mean, and I know people that work forever on a sentence. I mean, give me a break. I mean, if a sentence sings, it sings, and if not, so good luck. Stop looking over your own shoulder. That's what does it. You're trying to edit when you should just be writing. How many people in here write? Oh, cool.
Wow.
Do you do anything that how many of you do what I just tried to dissuade her from doing? Who suffers from writer's block? Oh, yeah, that's good.
Next question.
You'll get over it.
Hi, Terry.
Where are you?
I'm up here. Not a question, it's a statement. When you mentioned earlier that the woman was not intelligent enough to make a comment about these women having problems financially and kind of alluding to the fact that it was more of a racist or a heritage issue, that most likely that black individuals would have financial complications. Well, I can tell you that your work transcends, because it has nothing to do with who you are and where you're from. Your books have touched my life in every enormous fashion that one can imagine, and I'm from Canada. And my name is Simone, and I'm French. And so whatever.
And you're not black?
You know what? My
just
father's
kidding.
family didn't migrate to Baton Rouge, but anyway, you know, yeah. And I just came back from New Orleans, so my father was Cree Indian. He's from the Cree Nation. But my point being is that whomever would misconstrue that your stories are specifically or implicitly about the black culture are totally wrong, because I've always connected with your message and your books and your talent and your qualities.
Well, thank you. But I'll say this. I mean, one of the things that, I mean, I don't use a race card unless I think it's appropriate. But the child was racist, how she said it, you know? And I said, you know, bottom line is this. When I go into a bookstore, do I think, gee, I'm looking for a book by a white writer. I want to read about some white people who are poor. From Flint. You know, no, and that's. I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure it out. And the fact of the matter is, I was offended because the New York Times allowed it.
Yeah.
And that's what I told my agent, who was all thrilled. Oh, that the Times, and it's a good theory, it's quotable. And I'm like, you know, I don't care. My book, people will, if they like my work, they're going to read the book. I don't need the New York Times to put a stamp of approval on it, and especially to let some racist try to dictate, you know.
You think we're getting into a time, if you were a young writer today, where you'll ever be able to be just a writer, not a black woman writer? Is that world?
I don't
think
I have
so?
no idea. I don't know. I don't think so. I don't care, because the bottom line is I'm black. I'm always going to be black, and you know. But again, I mean, I read books by
People.
every ethnicity you can think of, but I don't say like, oh gee whiz, I'm going to read Amy Tan's My Chinese Friend's new book. No. I read what arouses my curiosity, and I don't care who writes it. And I don't come to a story with a whole lot of expectations or with my own. I mean, I'm not expecting, if I read a book by, let's say one of my favorite memoirs is Rick Bragg. Anybody heard of Rick Bragg?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you got to read him. Oh, all over but the shouting. He's a white Southern writer. You would never know it. And let me tell you, but he can write. Like, he's a Pulitzer Prize winner, but he can write. Oh my God. And I thought he was black when I read it, till I looked at his picture. I don't know. I read everything, and I think all of us should. And you can learn a lot from other writers. And that's it.
How do you choose what to read?
How do I choose?
How do you choose what you read? It's hard. I find it.
I read, first of all, bookstores are like my second home.
And you live.
And not only that, but I'll put it this way. When I moved from the Bay Area down here, I donated 3,500 books to libraries in the hood to make sure these kids had books. But I didn't realize how many books. These are books that I've had since college. And they didn't get any first editions, I'll tell you that much.
Just the paperbacks.
No, hardcover. I have a Goodnight Moon signed for my son,
Wow.
among other things. Toni Morrison, Bluest Eye, first edition, signed. There are a lot of, most writers are nosy. And I read a lot. Now with social media and everything online, I read about other writers. And if something just piques my interest, I'm like, really? But again, I'm just nosy. And I can go in a bookstore or a library, mostly a bookstore, because I like to support other writers. And I'm curious. Mm-hmm. And some writers you kind of know, and I like to support new writers because they need it. And somebody supported me when I was back in the day, so. And also word of mouth. I have friends who also read, and they say, girl, you gotta read this. Have you heard of? No. You think it's a drug deal or something. Girl, no. I'll send you a copy. Okay. Reading a good book is like falling in love. And not quite, but you get lost. Nothing between writing and getting lost. I have a chair, and I have this very cool light that cost me a fortune, but it's like not a real light, but it doesn't emit heat. You know that light? Mm-hmm. It's a really good light. Mm-hmm. And I can sit in that chair. I think the only thing that would do is an earthquake. I'm not kidding you, because you know, it's like sometimes I have to go to the bathroom. I don't want to get up. Or I'm hungry and I know I need to eat, but I don't want to stop. And that's a dream come true.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
And our final question for the evening.
Hi, Terry.
Hi.
Can you tell us what it was like with your first movie that was produced, what it was like to see
Can
those
I tell you what?
Can you
Movie.
tell us a little bit about seeing your first movie produced on screen? What was it like to see those characters that came out of your own head on screen?
First movie, was it Waiting? to Exhale that was
Exhale, Waiting to
Waiting
Exhale.
to Exhale.
Well, you wrote it, right? Or you co-wrote it, so
Mm-hmm.
you made it. But what was it like to see?
It was fun.
How could it?
It was, I mean, the process is so long. It's not as much fun as writing it. Let me tell you that much. Ugh. I was flattered. Whitney, Angela, Loretta, Forrest did a good job. It was almost surreal until it really started happening. Because somebody bought the movie rights to Disappearing Acts, which was my second book, and they paid me $25,000 for an option. And back then, let me tell you, I told my son, we are going to party. I took him to Macy's, and got him some really cool little high tops. And I don't think of, I'll put it this way. When I got to 25,000, my agent, she's still my agent, said, Terry, I want to tell you right now, just take the money and run, okay? Because Hollywood, they option everything. Chances are it'll never be a movie. Just take the money. And I did for 6 years. And then I wrote another book. And it was called Disappearing Acts. No, Disappearing Acts was one of, duh.
And then it was Waiting after that, right?
And then I wrote Waiting to Exhale. And then they gave me a lot of money. And then they actually made a movie. And I was like, they do make movies from books, Molly.
You got more money for that paperback than anybody ever got for a paperback before, right?
Except for what's his name?
Scott Turow.
Scott Turow. You know more about the Yeah. Scott Turow. Yeah, he was and I was the second highest ever paid, which doesn't make any sense.
Tell
But
him how much money.
I took the money and ran very fast. It's flattering to have your book turned into a movie, but I wrote it to be read, and so the movie is just extra. It's like free money.
But you were happy with the results.
Yeah, I like all of them. The ones for television. I think they've done very good jobs. I'm not embarrassed by it. I would like to see this one to be made into a movie. I'd take all the other ones back for this one, because this one is about a middle-aged woman, and there's love involved, and we don't get to see ourselves as black women, middle-aged, being strong and sexy and healthy and sexual beings and falling in love and all that. You usually have to be 21, blonde, and white. And I'm sick of it. Because we can still be sexy and all kinds of stuff. We still have lives, and it's young people who think that life stops at 30. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't. And, it's like when you're a kid, the thought of your parents kissing and doing that other thing, just the thought makes you want to throw up. Ew. And they're having another baby? Ew. What did they do to get this one? You know what I mean? So, and now, that's why I love Helen Mirren. She's a sexy woman. And I just think that I would love, and somebody that you all know that I'm not going to say, wants to, and she's on a hit television series right now, and she plays a sleazy person. That's all I'm going to say. I would, and plus, this woman she weighs 175 pounds. She's heavy. She's thick, as my mama would say. And, you can be thick and sexy. You don't have to be 120 pounds. What?
What my favorite line, I don't want to be reminded of what I used to look like because I look the way I'm supposed to now.
Right now. That's not really true.
It's her birthday party where someone's trying to show her pictures of her old self.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're getting the cane right now.
Yeah, I gotta go watch Forensic Files.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you so
Terry.
much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Lisa.